Facts is that the Khomeini is a CIA agent. The Americans helped Khomeini to do a coup against the Shah. They gave him a whole country. Why? Because they believed that the Shia project would create a fissure within the Middle East. This whole Sunni versus Shia was very important to divide and conquer the Middle East. Israel right now, when it looks at the region, is looking what is the strategic threats to its existence. Trump right now, if he bluffs and if Iran does not basically buy into his bluff, he's in big trouble. And that's why I believe he might not have too much choice.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to i3 Pulse. Will Trump nuke Iran, or is he bluffing again? Is Israel using America as his wrecking ball to smash its threats? And will Iran strike first? Today on i3 Pulse. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Assalamu.
Sheikh, there's a lot of things that have been happening, right? These B-2 bombers, threats about war, nuclear war, what's going to be happening. But I want to start with one question here. Many Americans and people around the world are seeing this war with Iran as another instance of America being used for Israel's interests. You know, Israel's been saying for many years, Iran is 2 weeks away from acquiring nuclear capabilities. It's been saying it for many years.
No.
So is Israel being the puppet master, instigator, collaborator? What's Israel's role in this?
Yeah, so there's, I would say there's 4 reasons why the United States would, think about, attacking Iran. Number 1, push Iran back into its own little den, right? Because its initial role for the last 2 decades has been to scare these other Arab regimes, especially the oil regimes, and to control Iraq and support the United States in controlling Iraq and so forth, and to mobilize the Shia within the Middle East to create this big, fissure between Sunnis and Shia and so forth. So that role now has changed a little bit because the United States seems to want to build an economic corridor from India to the Mediterranean as a competition to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, right? So that's really number 1. This number 1 is basically they want some type of stability, and definitely people say, well, war is not going to create stability.
Yeah, because it seems like war won't create stability, and Israel is the winner from this scenario, Iran being like bombed and stuff, right?
Yeah. But see again, like Iran is using this nuclear program to negotiate with the United States and the world, basically, to allow it to create its own hegemony within the Middle East, right? So it has its own agenda to mobilize the Shia and to build its own little empire within the region. So this is number 1. Number 1 is basically to dismantle that program and to defy this regime, to subdue this regime. The second one, which I think is even bigger one, but I started with the one that basically is more U.S. interest based. The second one is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia and in the Gulf, regimes, especially the UAE and Saudi Arabia, they want to denuclearize Iran. They want Iran to stop bullying them. They want the Americans to come and literally cut the nails of this regime, and that's the second one. See, Saudi Arabia have told Trump and other U.S. administrations for them to normalize with Israel. There's a price, and the price has 2 pieces to it. Number 1 is a solution, a dignified solution, as MBS have said, for the Palestinians. That's not going to be dignified for real. It's just like for publicity talk, but something that can be consumed somehow by the Arab public for the Palestinian issue, some sort of 2-state solution or whatever it is. Number 2 is remove the Iranian threat from the region. So the Americans want this normalization to happen. That's why the Trump administration led this whole Abraham Accords. And they want to redraw the map of the Middle East. And to redraw the map of the Middle East, you need this normalization that helps basically in redrawing the Middle East from one perspective, involves Israel into the greater Middle East as a regular nation amongst many, and all that basically you need Iran to be removed from the picture.
So does that mean the U.S. wants to denuclearize Iran or no Iran at all?
No, I would say no Iran at all. Is just like, what are you going to do with like tens of millions of people, right? It's just, but maybe you mean no Iranian regime.
So, Sheikh, one thing that's on my mind, I'm sure on the viewers' mind, is on previous episodes, you mentioned that Iran is an agent to the United States, and they're playing their role in the game. Now, the U.S. is threatening them potentially with nukes or denuclearizing the denuclearization and a lot of maximum pressure. I mean, how does that work?
How does that add up? So let's go back to the fact. The facts is that the Khomeini is a CIA agent, is a person that was supported by the CIA, is a person who dealt with the CIA, synchronized with the CIA to get to power. Without the CIA, Khomeini would never have been able to do a coup against the Shah. You see what I'm saying? So in 1979, the CIA was behind Khomeini, who was living in France, supported him and brought him back to Iran and helped him basically, take over the country. Now, some people say basically since then until now, things changed and the clergy really took over. But these same people basically were they all worked for the United States. So there's one person who worked and another person who worked, and maybe they're a little bit more stronger regime. Maybe the Americans cannot, for example, assassinate Khamenei from the inside, but still these people are all linked. What people need to understand about agency: the minute colonial power infiltrates, there's many people who would be willing to work with the colonial power, right? Because they are in different positions. So everybody's aligned until basically you change the whole regime fully.
Because people think the word agent means that like the person has like a badge number and agent number and they're this and that. Like, what is that? Because sometimes people don't know what that word means.
Maybe at the beginning, well, see, it depends. See, if you're a small little guy on the payroll of some of these agencies, foreign agencies, you would be a person with a badge ID or whatever it is, and you get a salary and so forth. But when a person becomes like a leader of a country, it doesn't become like that anymore. He's not being paid a few $100. What happens basically now is his interest to stay within his position of power is how they get paid. American protection, for example, American protection for Khomeini, American protection for the successful coup that they've done. Like, the Americans helped Khomeini to do a coup against the Shah. They gave him a whole country. Why? Because they believed that the Shia project would create, as we said, a fissure within the Middle East. This whole Sunni versus Shia, it was very important to divide and conquer the Middle East and to weaken the different states, to weaken Saddam Hussein, to remove Saddam Hussein, to weaken the oil states. Right now, the oil states are begging America for support to get rid of this threat. You see what I'm saying? So if you want these Gulf states to do what you want as in America, you need something to threaten them. So this is the game. You see what I'm saying? It's a game of interest at the end of the day. When we say age, it's not basically like a baby, dependent upon a mother. Like, it's not like that. Sometimes it is a child-parent relationship, as we said with Israel. In the case of Iran, it's not like that. The role of Iran before was to threaten the Gulf states, to threaten, to expand in the region, to take Shia Islam and mobilize the Shia within the Muslim world to create this divide between Sunnis and Shia. So they fueled this tension, what I'm saying? In Iraq, the Shia and the Sunni, they lived for hundreds of years with each other. Most families in Iraq are basically Sunni Shia together. And they intermarry everywhere. Yeah. So it's not something that's not like, it's the norm. It's not even, when they say common, it's a small statement. It's the norm is to basically people to marry from each other and so forth. Who spilled fuel in the fire? The Americans, you see what I'm saying?
So you mentioned back to the reasons why the U.S. is considering aggressive military move to denuclearize Iran. One was Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states.
Yeah.
What are other potential reasons?
So the third reason is Israel itself. Israel right now, when it looks at the region, is looking what is the strategic threats to its existence, or even if it's not for existence, what threatens Israel from a national interest perspective. But there's this military analyst who said there's 3 countries that actually threatens Israel right now. It's Egypt, Iran, and Turkey. Iran being number 1, by the way. So that's why they've been trying to deal with Iran for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Like Egypt and Turkey, I think they became a threat lately, right? Turkey because it expanded a lot economically, militarily, geopolitically. And Egypt, it became a very big state, from that perspective, and the instability of the regime. Like everybody knows, Sisi is a big defender of Israel. Number 2, I think maybe what happened, maybe the change that happened also from Israeli perspective is like, okay, now we need to. They want to expand further, so they might want to basically push, and we can have this discussion in a different episode. They might want to push on the Camp David Accords and the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, maybe, and break that. Maybe it's time for them to break it to be able to maybe take over Sinai, for example, as an example. So anyway, so Israel right now, they want to get rid of Iran. Netanyahu, since like decades ago, been trying to,
It's always been saying.
they've been trying to push the United States to destroy Iran and to take out the nuclear program. Number 4 is the United States wants to get rid of all this like whole Islamic resistance concept from the Muslim world. They want the Muslims to basically just, pray and fast, keep their little religious rituals, but become liberals and secularists. Basically follow UAE, right? UAE was the model. And now Saudi Arabia is following UAE's model.
Yeah.
Like MBS is following MBZ. Yeah. So they want the Middle East to be like that. Just basically people who just consumers, people with no ideology, people with no aspiration, people with no dreams, people with no civilization. They just want them to be consumers and workers. It's basically slavery 2.0. So this is the 4th reason. So Iran, again, because it was fulfilling its role by the United States from before to being that that resistance movement and Islamic revolution and so forth, and that's why they had to go cut all of its nails. Basically, they cut off Hezbollah, they cut off the Assad regime, they're cutting off the Houthis, they're cutting off Hamas, they will cut off also some of the Shia militias in Iran, in Iraq. And now they might basically hit the nuclear program.
So, Sheikh, but still, I'm trying to understand, why is it that Israel's been saying for a long time, right? Iran's 2 weeks away, 2 weeks away, 2 weeks away. Like, why? Okay, if that's the case, why didn't the U.S. take decisive action before? And why now?
Yeah, well, there's 2 reasons. Number 1 is the strategic objective of the United States within the region and how Iran played a role within that, that project. Did not necessitated that Iran does not have a nuclear program. Use it basically as something to threaten the Gulf states and so forth, and maybe even Israel to a certain extent, even though they're both agents for America. Number 2, the Iranians know that this is a red line, right? Like it's a red line. Getting nuclear is a red line from an American perspective. Okay.
So everyone says, right, that Iraq was attacked because of weapons of mass destruction, right? But then U.S. doesn't mess with North Korea. U.S. does not mess with certain other countries that have nuclear capabilities. Other countries, when they denuclearized, they got invaded, right? So it's kind of like you have Rocket Man, North Korea. Why can't there just be? Why can't the Iranians just do it and become rocket mullahs and then just protect their country?
Yeah, so because they know that the minute basically they are close enough, the Americans will come and hit hard, right? And so the North Koreans, and sometimes what you need to understand is sometimes the Americans, there is not a single country that attained nuclear power without permission, right? Because some of these countries are, it's in the interest of the Americans, for example, for the Indians to have nuclear power. Why? Because it balances China. Like the Americans want the Indians to be nuclear power, right? And the Pakistanis said, look, if they're nuclear power, we have to be nuclear power. So they're like, okay, well, you guys also get some nukes too, right? Like it's just, so there was an interest because a nuclear India is a must for it to stand for a nuclear China. You understand? And as you said, basically, when they denuclearized Ukraine, look what happened in Ukraine. The Ukrainian people were stabbed in the back, decades ago. If Ukraine had nuclear power, the Putin would not have ever basically messed with Ukraine.
So the average person might think like, okay, if Iran's that close, just do it. They'll protect their national security.
Exactly.
It's more complicated than that.
It is way more complicated because you need the delivery systems. Okay. You need the delivery systems. You need the integration of the nuclear head on these delivery systems, and you need the bomb itself, right? So, and getting one is not enough anyway. And getting one. And see, there's also types of there's tactical nuclear devices and there's strategic ones. Strategic ones could really like engulf the whole area.
Yeah.
Like you can't a nuclear bomb, if it basically gets exploded, like let's say within the Middle East, it'll affect everybody, including the Iranians.
Yeah,
that's why many people basically doubt that Israelis do have strategic nuclear devices. They don't. See, these things need testing, right? They need testing. So at best, the Israelis have tactical nuclear weapons, and I don't think they do.
And tactical nuclear are the ones that don't have the fallout that everyone talks about. Like they just like completely just engulfs everywhere.
Correct. They're way more limited. Yeah. I don't want to say safer because you can't be safe with that, but yeah. And that's why the Americans would hit very hard, very quickly. Especially that we know how the political establishment in Iran is. There are lots of spies for the Mossad. There's lots of spies for the CIA. So they know if Iran's getting close. And that's why basically they know that's why the Americans, they say it very confidently. They don't have it yet.
What's America's concern here, right? Is America's problem the Iran having nuclear, or is it also the regime that currently exists in Iran today?
Well, see, so as I said, basically, it seems, well, we need to see, like, the Iranian nuclear program. If the United States believes that the Iranians are now moving into it, they will hit them hard. They'll have to hit them, basically. They have to dismantle it. But is it the program is the issue, or is the regime now is an issue? Or is it just basically trying to appease the Saudis and the Israelis and you know what I'm saying? So this is what we want to understand. This is what we're going to understand the next, few days or few weeks to come, is what does the Americans want? Because see, we saw there's a whole aircraft carrier group, right? A CSG, it's called a carrier strike group, CSG, right? Like, so it's an aircraft carrier with lots of destroyers and amphibious warships coming in together. They're coming to the Middle East. They already have, I think, another one basically close by. And now they moved all these B-2 bombers to Diego Garcia. And they have multiple bases in the Middle East, like in Qatar, which is one of the largest American bases. And they have also a base in Turkey, and there's many bases otherwise and elsewhere. So the Americans seem they're preparing for a strike. And the question is basically, is this for negotiations only? And this is what Trump said, right? Like,
Is he way the hard way? Really?
there's needs way in the hard way. Like, Trump wants to negotiate only. He doesn't want to create a war. And because the fall, if he does strike Iran, and really there's a split, there's multiple risks. The first one, I think the relationship between the Americans and the Iranians will break forever if they really, really strike hard. Then especially if they're trying to do a regime change. And that what's going to happen is basically, first, number one is the whole region will fall into literally instability and uncertainty. Number two, it's going to push the Iranians 100% now into Russian and Chinese laps. See, the Russians and the Chinese never wanted to give anything strategic to Iran because they know the regime is American dependent or American, proxy. There have been promised, like, Iranians were trying to basically buy lots of technology from Russia, like the S-400 and even the S-300 basically before, because they're speaking about it for a long, long time. They've never delivered these systems. And if they did, they gave us something small. Why? Because they're not going to, the Iranians did not agree to become an agent for Russia or for China. But if so number one is instability in the region, which is really, we've been saying that this is not the goal for the Trump administration unless it's an instability that's followed by long-term stability, investment. Number two is going to push the Iranians into the laps of the Chinese and the Russians, and that will create basically a foothold for those two powers in the Middle East for real, because right now they don't have any. Because number three is basically, in addition to instability, is the American interest in the region will be dramatically threatened, because Iran can do some damage against the oil infrastructure in the Gulf states, against Israel, against the shipping lanes in the global markets, against even basically some of the bases in the American bases across the Pacific and the Middle East. So the third thing is basically, literally, American interests would definitely be threatened. So I think basically striking Iran, I'm not sure if this is going to happen really, but we listed the four reasons. Basically, that's why they might consider striking. But I believe until now it's more for negotiations, with a good possibility of a real strike intended if the negotiations fails. Like, the strike will only happen, the rate of this strike happening will literally go up from maybe like 20% right now to 80% or 70% if the negotiations fail. But as of now, personally, I believe right now, all this, military asset movements is for negotiations reasonings. Because don't forget, basically, maybe there's another thing that we never spoke about, is that the role of Iran changed today, but you don't want to get rid of this asset called Iran. Because maybe 10 years from today, or 5 years from today, or maybe whatever it is, even long term, 20 years from today, the Iran might be needed again by the United States. You see what I'm saying? Like Iran, for example, when in the Iraq invasion in 2003 was a primary asset for the United States to invade Iraq.
Yeah.
That actually the United States, they left Iraq to the Iranians to manage. Who's managing Iraq? The Iranians. But did the Iranians fight the United States to take it over? No, it was literally, handover. Why? Because there's trust and there's a relationship behind the scenes. So does the United States want to change them? Unless the United States, this is the only thing, unless the United States wants to do a regime change in itself. And that's why we said basically what are the risks. If they want regime change because they don't want this whole like mullah type of clergy type of regimes, that's a different story.
And it's kind of possible too, right? Because this whole push against this to become a very fully secular, the kind of global.
Yeah, but see, if you want regime change, you would have an intelligence operation.
Yeah,
you would do a coup from the inside. You don't strike.
Yeah.
Like striking a country will rally the people behind the regime.
Yeah, got it.
You see what I'm saying? So it's just it doesn't seem. That's what I'm saying. Nothing is adding up right now. But we do see these military assets moved and mobilized towards a strike. Will the strike happen? Yes, maybe, definitely. The strike is possible. It is less possible right now because and Trump said it very clearly that he prefers the negotiation to work. If the negotiations fails, that's where basically now the rate of striking becomes a little bit more.
And is it possible in that case for America to use tactical nukes then on those sites?
I would say they have to. The Americans have to use nuclear tactical weapons on Iran because these bunker busters, these GBU 32s and 57s, they have a limited depth, to what the Iranians have dug. The Iranians know that basically these tools basically have a specific depth. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's 200 feet down on even through reinforced concrete. But they would basically build these missile silos way deeper than that, and that's why really the Americans might have to use tactical nuclear weapons to smash those underground facilities. It seems, which is very, very, it'll be very sad, but it seems this is on the table.
Trump is in a very tough spot. Could this be America's last word? What I mean by that is that Trump is between a rock and a hard place. If he caves in and he exposes his bluff and Iran ignores him, now no one's going to take him seriously when he threatens terrorists around the world. If he pushes Iran too far and he attacks them and he's too strong, he risks them becoming and falling into the lap of China and Russia.
Yeah.
So is this the beginning of the end for the U.S. hegemony?
Well, I wouldn't say the beginning of the end now. Maybe the early beginning, but and you're right. I think Trump right now, if he bluffs and if Iran does not basically buy into his bluff, he's in big trouble because he threatened many countries, and many countries, okay, I'll do this. Please don't put tariffs on me. Everybody's going to start defying Trump. I think he will. The first person, whether it's Iran or anybody else, that defies Trump and showcases a bluff, the American foreign policy will be hit very hard. Okay? And that's why I believe he might not have too much choice, really. He needs to, whatever he intends in the negotiation with Iran, he needs to get that. Right? And publicly, that needs to be clear to the masses, so it doesn't seem as if he's retracting. And definitely, as you said, from a perspective, if he pushes Iran too much, look, agent regimes change, agencies, right? Like they might flip from the U.S. to they become really a Chinese satellite country.
The whole thing of that, it could escalate and how uncertain things are, it's very scary.
It'll create more competition in the Middle East.
Yes, definitely.
So, might be good for the Middle East.
What's next? Okay, U.S. wants to sideline Iran now, right? They served their purpose. They might reactivate them later. But then who's going to emerge now in the Middle East? Is it potentially Saudi, Turkey, or Israel going to take the whole pie? Like, who's going to take over?
I don't think anybody's going to take the whole pie, which is why the Americans are always basically trying to balance powers, right? There's Iran, there's Israel, there's Turkey, there's Saudi, there's Egypt. So these are the 5 big ones, right? But what the United States wants is a subservient region where basically they can colonialize it fully, run the show as a global power without any resistance. And that's where basically, it's sad that this area which has well, I don't want to say it has 2 billion Muslims only in the Middle East, but the whole Muslim world, which is also subservient, sadly, is not free. Like, everybody wants freedom. Everybody wants freedom, and sadly, nobody gives freedom to anybody. Everybody wants to stay on top, and that's why the Muslim Ummah needs to understand that for it to become independent, it has to start basically in here, to have a vision, to understand that it has own special civilization. This civilization that spread, peace and harmony and science and technology and human development in the world for over 1,000 years, right? We've been, as a Muslim Ummah, we've been on our knees for 200, 300 years, right? I mean, one of the really basically the Ottomans, they hit the wall hard in when they had to they lost a big battle. And they had to sign the Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699. This is where the downfall of the Ottomans started, really. So let's say 1700 for short. Yeah, it's been 300 years, 325 years. We've been behind. So today, as a Muslim Ummah, we have 2 billion people in the world. We need to understand that what unifies people is the national vision for the collective, for the whole nation. Most people understand Islam as a personal religion that doesn't unite nobody. There's just people who believe in similar things, but that's really it. Doesn't glue us together. That doesn't create a nation. What creates a nation is a national vision that people believe in and they mobilize to live by it. The Muslim Ummah has the most dignified, the most honorable vision for humanity. The word Islam, in its root comes from a root of peace. But what does that mean? That means basically it has the political system that can influence the international community to live in peace and harmony and so forth. We want justice. The goal of Islam as a political system is justice, human justice for everybody. You see, we live today in an era here in Europe and North America where justice is preferential. There's discrimination in terms of who gets justice, right? There's discrimination in terms of free speech. You can speak about this, but you can't speak about this. You can protest for this cause, but you cannot protest for this cause.
Yeah.
There's no real, freedoms anymore. There's no justice anymore here in the West. So the liberal perspective that dominated the world for the last couple hundred years, right? More than that,
Yeah.
already unraveled. There's no. You can't come back because you showed your true color. The liberal perspective, right? The liberal modernist, Western perspective is racist, right? Islam is the one that truly believes in justice for all, in freedom for everybody. Islam is the first civilization in history, that really allowed minorities to have the freedom of religious practice. Why do you think there's Coptic Christians in Egypt for 1400 years? Why do you think there's Jews in Morocco and Iraq and Yemen and in many other places? Because this Islamic civilization is tolerant. Like, non-Muslim Western historians will tell you that the Islamic civilization is a super tolerant civilization for its time and for today. Now, in the last couple of hundred years, when the Islamic civilization was weakened due to the colonization across the board from Indonesia to Morocco, we lost our advantage, our edge. Basically, we lost the core message that we had, and then the Europeans came and said, and they took some of the same values that we had, and we preached that, justice and peace and equality and liberty for everybody and so forth. I mean, the French Revolution basically was built upon 3 slogans. Liberty, equality, and fraternity, right? Brotherhood. So, these are similar themes to what Islam propagates in terms of equality, in terms of all the servants of God. Liberty in terms of basically liberty from human subjugation. Nobody should be subjugated to anybody, but we all submit to God, who basically sends us this system of justice, which is the political system of Islam. Islam is the only means for prosperity for the planet Earth, for justice for everybody, for all the 8 billion people, for a life of peace across the world. But people need to understand it outside this religion. The religion of Islam is a choice. preaching it basically as the message of Islam is problematic, because the message of Islam to the world is a message of justice. Let's live in harmony. Let's live with justice. Let's live by the law and order that is divine, that is perfect. Yeah? And then everybody should have the freedom with zero influence to choose their religious beliefs. But who speaks like that? See, sadly, this is too political of a talk for some. And the non-Muslims, even the Islamophobes, they don't understand what I'm saying right now. They're like, what's this guy talking about? This guy seems to be more liberal than an Islam person. Well, no, the real Islam is actually, it's a political system of justice for everybody with freedom of religious practice. You see what I'm saying? Like, for example, let's speak about, the whole free speech idea. Brother, like during the later Ottoman times, when the Ottomans were really like in a downfall, and they didn't stand up for the Islamic ideology that they should be. The newspapers were to open a newspaper in the Ottoman lands, were just basically you send a little letter saying we're opening a new newspaper. This is, if you don't hear back, you have the permission. Like you sending a message saying I'm opening a newspaper is the approval by the state or by the province. The right of assembly, which is in the American Constitution, in the First Amendment. Anybody who wants to open a new political party in the Ottoman lands, for example, in my country, in Lebanon, this law is still basically utilized until now, because there's nothing better than that. To open a new political party, you just need to send a message saying basically, just to let whomever it may concern, we're opening a new party. This is what's it called, and that's it. That's your approval, unless you hear otherwise after. You see what I'm saying? Like this is how the Muslim world ran. People can open their newspapers, people can open political parties, people can create assemblies, people can speak, people can criticize. This is how we lived. People project the Islamophobes and the ignorant people about what Islam is. Sadly, some Muslims too. They project as if Islam is just it's all about religion. It's not about religion. Islam has a religion, yes, but it's a political system of justice for everybody. They showcase it as if it's repressive. You can't speak. You can't wear what you want. You can't no.
They're actually projecting what their ancestors used to do in Europe.
Yes, exactly. They're projecting basically the Judeo-Christian culture of repression during the Dark Ages on what Islam is, and it's not.
Which is, by the way, Sheikh, exposes a very racist mindset.
It is very racist.
And even though my forefathers were wrong, but because my forefathers were European, they're definitely more guided than your forefathers. So if they were wrong, you guys were quadruple wrong.
Well, 100%.
Yeah.
This is exactly how they see it. And it's ignorant. And look, we're okay to forgive people. But what we call for everybody here from this little podcast is for people to open their minds. If you're not Muslim right now and you're listening to us, listen a little bit more about what really Islam is as a system, as a political system of life. Okay, compared to capitalism, don't compare it to Christianity. I don't care about your Christianity. I don't care about his Islam. Your religion is yours. His religion is his. Okay, his religion doesn't impact me. He believes basically with his faith he goes to heaven. Yes, we believe as a Muslim. I believe basically my faith takes me to heaven, but that's afterlife. But what about this life? Islam came to rule people with peace and justice. Equality in front of the law for everybody. It seems like no discrimination. And justice for everybody.
It was exactly for people who are like, oh, what's this Sheikh saying? Well, actually, it's actually capturing the Quran, right? So this concept, right, that Allah sent the messages for this purpose specifically of establishing justice.
Yes.
So
وَيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that He has sent this Islam as a system of governance, so people can rule with justice over the affairs of people, the public affairs of people.
All right. Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh. May Allah bless you. I appreciate your time. Everybody, you got to share this video, like, comment, subscribe, engage with this video. There's a lot of discussions, a lot of points that we're making, and we're going to talk about the real issues and give the analysis that maybe others may not give on YouTube. So stay tuned for the next episode at i3 Pulse.